My brother assaulted my friend, so I turned him in and made sure he faced justice. My entire family disowned me and said, "See you later, alligator," for it. But now he's free, and they're inviting me back to start fresh, like nothing happened. I might just tell them in a while, crocodile. I turned my brother in because it was the right thing to do and uncovered a truth about my family I couldn't handle. Growing up, my brother was the star golden boy who got all the love and attention. So much so that the first time in my life my parents actually cared about me was when he messed up. It happened during a party after my brother's team won the state championship. I was hanging out near the kitchen when I saw him talking to a girl from my English class. She looked nervous and kept glancing around the room like she wanted out, but he handed her another drink anyway. She kept smiling awkwardly like she was just being polite, and then she locked eyes with me. She gave me that look that suggested she needed a girl to step in and help her, but I looked the other way. My brother couldn't be a monster, but then he led her upstairs, and something about the way he did it felt off. His hand on her thigh looked predatory, too forceful. My stomach twisted, but I stayed silent, unsure if I was reading too much into it. An hour later, I was wandering around looking for a bathroom and opened a bedroom door by mistake. The same girl sat on the edge of the bed, her hair messy, makeup smeared, crying quietly. Our eyes met, and the shame on her face made my heart drop. She wiped her tears fast and hurried out without saying anything. Downstairs, my brother was laughing loudly like nothing happened. Maya didn't come to school after that night. 3 days passed, and the knot in my stomach tightened. I found my brother alone in the kitchen and decided to speak up. "I saw you with Maya," I said. He forced a laugh. "She was wasted. I was just helping her find a room to rest." "But she was crying," I pressed. His expression darkened immediately. "Are you accusing me? Seriously? What do you think I am, a monster? You've always been jealous. You're always making stuff up for attention." He walked away and slammed the door behind him. A week went by. Maya's desk stayed empty, and the guilt eventually overwhelmed me. I made an anonymous tip to the school counselor with dates and specifics. An investigation started up, and my brother was temporarily suspended. That night, my parents burst into my room furious. Mom cried hysterically, shouting, "Someone's trying to ruin your brother's life." Dad paced, calling lawyers. They didn't know it was me, yet. But then they remembered they had dropped me off to the party alongside my brother. They started questioning me. I tried to lie, but the hesitation in my voice gave me away. As soon as they realized I was the one to put the report in, they went insane. My dad opened a bottle and started drinking. My mom began screaming about betrayal, and my brother cornered me later, his eyes blazing. "You couldn't just be happy for me, no? You selfish, evil bitch." I felt suffocated, terrified of what they might do to me. The next 2 weeks were hell. They kept threatening me to take the report back, and I was going to, simply out of fear. But something in me told me to hold my ground, and I'm so happy that I did, because 2 weeks later, Maya went to the police herself. Thankfully, they actually took her seriously. I was asked by Maya to testify a few days later. I wanted to. I really did. But when I told my parents, my mom slapped me so hard my cheek burned. "We gave you everything, and you repay us by destroying our family," she yelled. That's when I knew I had no choice but to do it. I packed my bag and stayed with my best friend until the hearing. At it, I detailed exactly what I saw. My whole family looked at me like I was a monster. Afterward, texts flooded my phone, cousins, aunts, uncles, all saying I'd betrayed my brother. Grandma messaged, "You aren't welcome at family gatherings anymore." That evening, Dad sent me a college brochure for a school 4 states away. They wanted me out of their lives forever. At my brother's sentencing, the courtroom was packed. His lawyer painted him as a kid who made a youthful mistake, and my brother got off with a reduced sentence. Dad approached afterward saying, "Family protects family. You failed us." He walked away without another word. 2 years later, I'm now sitting in my small dorm room far from home, and things feel simpler. My roommate doesn't know anything about my past, and I like it that way. But then yesterday my phone rang. It was Mom. I took a deep breath and answered, "Hello." There was this weird silence on the line for a few seconds. I almost thought she'd hung up, but then I heard her breathing. "Hi," Mom finally said, her voice sounding tired. "How are you?" I was so thrown off by the normalcy of the question that I couldn't even answer at first. How was I? After everything that happened, after 2 years of radio silence, I told her I was fine, doing well in school. She asked about my classes in this weirdly formal way, like we were distant acquaintances catching up at a high school reunion. I gave her the bare minimum details, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then she hit me with it. "Your brother is getting out next month." My stomach dropped. I knew this day was coming. His sentence wasn't that long, but hearing it made everything feel real again. I gripped my phone tighter, not sure what to say. Mom filled the silence by telling me that they were planning a welcome home party for Jake. That's when I realized why she was really calling. "We think it would be good if you came," she said, her voice taking on that familiar guilt trip tone I grew up with. "For the family, to show we've all moved past this unfortunate situation." Unfortunate situation. That's what she called it. Like Jake had accidentally dented someone's car, not sexually assaulted a girl at a party. I felt my face getting hot. 2 years away had changed me more than I realized, because instead of mumbling some excuse, I actually spoke up. "Mom, I don't think that's a good idea," I said. "I don't think I can pretend everything's okay." She sighed like I was being difficult on purpose. "It's been 2 years. Jake has paid for his mistake. The family needs healing now." I almost laughed. The family needs healing? What about Maya? What about me? But I knew this conversation wasn't going anywhere productive. I told Mom I'd think about it, which was easier than arguing. She seemed satisfied with that and wrapped up the call quickly after. I sat on my bed for a long time after hanging up, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. My roommate Zoe came in and found me staring at the wall. She's pretty cool, kind of a hippie art major who's always covered in paint and listens to bands nobody's heard of. She took one look at my face and asked what was wrong. I gave her the super condensed version. Trouble back home, family drama. She didn't push for details, just offered to grab ice cream from the dining hall. That's why I like Zoe. She knows when to ask questions and when to just offer ice cream. I tried to focus on my classes over the next few days, but Mom's call kept replaying in my head. I hadn't told anyone at college about what happened with Jake. It was nice being just a normal student instead of the girl who turned in her brother. But now I felt like my past was creeping back in. threatening the new life I'd built. A week later, Mom texted me the date of Jake's homecoming party. I didn't respond. The next day, Dad called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was brief and to the point. Your mother told me she invited you to welcome Jake home. I think you should come. It's time to put this behind us. Put this behind us. Like it was some petty argument about borrowing clothes without asking. I deleted the voicemail and tried to focus on my upcoming midterms. 3 days later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It's Maya. Can we talk? I nearly dropped my phone. Maya and I hadn't spoken since the trial. We weren't really friends before everything happened, and afterward, well, it was complicated. I felt connected to her through this awful shared experience, but also guilty that I hadn't helped her that night at the party. I texted back and agreed to a phone call that evening. When I answered, Maya sounded different than I remembered. Stronger, more confident. She told me she'd heard through mutual friends that Jake was getting out soon. She wasn't calling to talk about that, though. She was calling to thank me. I never really got to tell you how much it meant that you came forward, she said. I know what it cost you with your family. I sat down on the floor of my dorm room, my back against the bed. I should have done something sooner, I admitted. That night, when I saw you with him, I should have stepped in. Maybe, Maya said. But you did step up eventually. That matters. We talked for almost an hour. She told me she'd transferred to a different high school after everything happened, that she was at community college now and planning to transfer to a 4-year school next fall. She was doing okay, all things considered. Before we hung up, she asked if I was going back for Jake's homecoming. My parents want me to, I said. They think we should all pretend nothing happened. Maya was quiet for a moment. You know, I used to be so angry at your parents, how they defended him, how they treated you, but now I mostly feel sorry for them. They're still living in denial while you've moved on with your life. After we hung up, I thought about what Maya said. Had I really moved on, or was I just hiding from my past? I'd been avoiding, dealing with my family by staying away, focusing on school, making new friends. Maybe it was time to actually face them. I texted Mom that night, I'll come to the party. Her response was immediate. Wonderful. Dad will book your flight. The next 2 weeks flew by in a blur of exams and papers. I told Zoe I was heading home for a weekend to deal with some family stuff. She offered to drive me to the airport, which was super nice of her. As we pulled up to the departures terminal, she gave me this serious look. Whatever's waiting for you back there, remember you've got people here who care about you, she said. I almost cried right there in her hit-up Honda. The flight was only 2 hours, but it felt like forever. I'd brought homework to distract myself, but ended up just staring out the window the whole time. When we landed, I half expected to see my parents waiting at the gate, but of course they weren't there. Dad had sent money for a rental car instead. Typical. Driving through my hometown was surreal. Everything looked exactly the same, but I felt like a completely different person. I passed my old high school, the mall where we used to hang out, the park where Jake's team had their victory parade after winning state. It was like visiting a museum of my former life. I pulled up to my parents' house around 6 p.m. It looked the same too. Perfect lawn, perfect flowers, perfect facade. I sat in the car for a few minutes trying to calm my racing heart. Then I grabbed my overnight bag and walked up to the front door. I still had my key, but it felt wrong to just walk in, so I rang the doorbell. Mom answered, wearing an apron and a forced smile. You're here, she said, pulling me into a stiff hug that felt more like a formality than actual affection. Come in, come in. Dad's grilling in the backyard. I stepped inside and was hit with a wave of nostalgia so strong it almost knocked me over. The house smelled the same. Mom's vanilla candles and Dad's coffee. Jake's trophies still dominated the living room, though I noticed they'd been rearranged a bit. Mom led me through to the kitchen, chattering about neighbors and relatives like we were just catching up after a short absence. Dad was at the grill, flipping burgers with the same focused expression he always had when cooking outdoors. He looked older, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. When he saw me, he nodded and said, "You made it." No hug, no smile, just acknowledgement of my presence. Jake will be here tomorrow, Mom explained, arranging condiments on a tray. We thought it would be good for us to have dinner, just the 3 of us tonight, to reconnect. Right, like we were old friends who'd simply lost touch. I nodded and asked if I could help with anything. Mom put me to work setting the table, and for a few minutes it almost felt normal. Almost. Dinner was awkward as hell. Mom kept the conversation going with questions about college and comments about the weather. Dad mostly ate in silence, occasionally grunting in response to Mom's prompts. No one mentioned Jake or what had happened. It was like we were all reading from a script titled, Perfectly Normal Family Dinner. After we finished eating, Dad cleared his throat. Your mother and I have been talking, he said, setting down his napkin. We think it's important that tomorrow goes smoothly, for Jake's sake. I tensed up, waiting for the other shoe to drop. What your brother did was wrong, Dad continued, surprising me. But he served his time. He's coming home to start fresh. We need to support that. What exactly are you asking me to do? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom jumped in. We're not asking you to pretend nothing happened. Just, maybe don't bring it up. This is supposed to be a positive day. I looked between them, these people who had raised me but never really seen me. So, you want me to come to a party celebrating Jake's return, but not mention why he was gone in the first place. It's not about ignoring what happened, Mom said, her voice taking on that pleading tone. It's about focusing on the future, not the past. I pushed my chair back from the table. The thing is, Mom, I don't think Jake has a future until he actually deals with his past. Has he ever even admitted what he did? Has he shown any remorse at all? Dad's face hardened. Jake made a mistake. He's paid for it. What more do you want from him? An apology would be a start, I said. Not to me. To Maya. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom looked down at her plate. Dad's jaw clenched. I realized in that moment that nothing had changed. They were still protecting Jake, still making excuses, still expecting the world to revolve around him. I think I'm going to stay at a hotel tonight, I said, standing up. I'll come by tomorrow for the party, but I can't stay here. Mom started to protest, but Dad cut her off. Let her go, Linda. She's made up her mind. I went upstairs to grab the few things I'd unpacked. My old bedroom looked exactly the same, like a time capsule from high school. I sat on the bed for a minute, running my hand over the familiar comforter. Then I noticed something on my desk that hadn't been there when I left for college. A small stack of envelopes tied with a ribbon. I picked them up and realized they were cards and letters that had been sent to me over the past 2 years. Birthday cards from my grandmother, Christmas cards from aunts and uncles, even a graduation card from my old science teacher. Mail that my parents had never forwarded to me. I stuffed them in my bag, suddenly furious. When I came back downstairs, Mom was washing dishes, her back to me. Dad was nowhere to be seen. I told her I was leaving and would see them tomorrow. She turned around, her eyes red. "We just want our family back," she said quietly. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "The family you're trying to get back never really existed, Mom. It was always built on lies." I drove to a Holiday Inn near the highway and checked in for the night. In my room, I opened the stack of mail. Most of it was just generic well wishes, but my grandmother's card surprised me. Despite what she'd said about me not being welcome at family gatherings, her notes were warm and loving. "I miss you," she'd written in her shaky handwriting. "I hope you're finding your way." I fell asleep wondering what tomorrow would bring, half tempted to just drive back to campus in the morning and forget this whole thing. But I knew I had to see it through. I hadn't come back just for my parents or for Jake. I'd come back for me. The next morning, I got a text from Mom. "Party starts at 2. Jake's excited to see you." I doubted that very much, but I replied that I'd be there. I spent the morning driving around town, visiting places that used to matter to me. The library where I'd spent countless afternoons, the ice cream shop where I had my first job, the park where I used to read when I needed to escape my house. It was strange how familiar everything felt, yet how distant. I pulled up to my parents' house at exactly 2:15, late enough to make a point, but not so late that it would cause a scene. There were already about a dozen cars parked along the street. I recognized my uncle's SUV and my cousin's hit-up Jeep. Great, the whole family was here. Mom answered the door again, this time in a floral dress and full makeup. "You're here," she said, like she was surprised I'd actually shown up. "Everyone's in the backyard. Jake just arrived about 20 minutes ago." I followed her through the house, noticing the welcome home banner hanging in the dining room and the table full of Jake's favorite foods. Classic Mom. She'd gone all out. The backyard was full of relatives and family friends, all clustered around the man of the hour. Jake looked different, thinner, with shorter hair and a guarded expression that hadn't been there before. When he saw me, he froze for a second, then nodded slightly. I nodded back, keeping my distance. People were watching us, waiting for some kind of dramatic confrontation, but I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. I made my way over to the drinks table and grabbed a soda. My cousin Taylor sidled up next to me. "We used to be close when we were kids, before high school turned us into strangers." "Bold move showing up," she said, filling her cup with punch. "Aunt Linda wasn't sure you would." I shrugged. "I said I would, so I did." Taylor glanced over at Jake, who was now talking to my uncle. "Is it weird, seeing him again?" "Everything about this is weird, Taylor," I said. She laughed, and for a moment, I remembered why we used to get along. The afternoon dragged on in a bizarre parody of normalcy. People ate, drank, and made small talk, carefully avoiding any mention of where Jake had been for the past 2 years. I stuck to the edges of the gathering, exchanging brief hellos with relatives who seemed unsure how to act around me. My grandmother wasn't there. Mom said she wasn't feeling well, but I suspected she was avoiding the awkwardness. I was about to slip away when Dad clinked his glass for attention. Everyone gathered around as he put his arm around Jake's shoulders. "We're so happy to have our son home," Dad said, his voice thick with emotion. "These past 2 years have been difficult for our family, but we've come through it stronger. Jake has paid his debt and is ready for a fresh start." People nodded and murmured in agreement. I stood frozen, unable to believe what I was hearing. Paid his debt? Like he'd been caught shoplifting, not sexually assaulting someone? "Jake has been accepted to state for the spring semester," Dad continued proudly. "He'll be finishing his degree and getting back on track." More nods, more murmurs. Someone started clapping, and soon everyone joined in. I felt sick. State was where Maya was planning to transfer next year. Did they know that? Did they care? Dad raised his glass. "To new beginnings," everyone echoed. "To new beginnings," and drank. I set my untouched soda down on a table and walked away. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't stand there and watch them celebrate Jake's fresh start while completely ignoring what he'd done and who he'd hurt. I was halfway to my car when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to find Jake following me down the driveway. "Running away again?" he said, his voice eerily calm. I stood my ground. "I'm not running away. I just can't be part of whatever that is back there." I gestured toward the house. Jake stepped closer. "You know, I had a lot of time to think in there. About you. About what you did." "What I did?" I repeated, incredulous. "You mean telling the truth?" "You could have talked to me first," he said, as if that would have changed anything. Given me a chance to explain. But no, you had to play the hero. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Explain what, Jake? What possible explanation could there be for what you did to Maya?" He flinched at her name. "You don't know what happened that night. You weren't there." "I saw enough," I said, "and so did the court." Jake's face darkened. "You ruined my life, my scholarship, my reputation, everything. I lost 2 years because of you." I felt a surge of anger so strong it made my hands shake. "You lost 2 years because of what you did. Not because of me, because of you." We stood there in the driveway, staring at each other like strangers. I realized I didn't know this person at all. Maybe I never had. The golden boy I'd grown up with, the brother I'd both resented and looked up to, was gone. Or maybe he'd never really existed in the first place. "Jake?" Mom's voice called from the backyard. "Where are you? People want to talk to you." Jake held my gaze for another moment, then turned and walked back toward the house without another word. I got in my rental car and drove away, hands still shaking on the steering wheel. I ended up at the old playground near my elementary school. It was empty on a Saturday afternoon, the swings moving slightly in the breeze. I sat on one, dragging my feet in the wood chips like I used to do as a kid. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Where did you go? Please come back." I didn't answer. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts and called my grandmother. She answered on the third ring. Her her voice warm and familiar. "I was hoping you'd call," she said. "Are you in town?" I told her I was, and asked if I could come see her. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in her small apartment, drinking tea from the same china cups she'd had since I was little. Unlike my parents' house, being here felt genuinely comforting. "I got your cards," I told her. Mom and Dad had been keeping them. Grandma shook her head. "I had a feeling. That's why I started sending emails too, but I wasn't sure if you were getting those either." I hadn't been. They must have gone to my old email that I rarely checked anymore. I felt a pang of sadness thinking about my grandmother trying to reach me all this time. "I'm sorry about what I said before," she continued. "About you not being welcome at family gatherings. Your father was standing right there when I was on the phone. I didn't mean it." I nodded, understanding. "It's okay. I know how Dad can be." We talked for hours. She told me she'd never believed Jake's version of events, that she'd been proud of me for speaking up even though she couldn't say so at the time. She showed me pictures of my younger cousins, caught me up on family news I'd missed. It felt good, like finding a piece of home I thought I'd lost forever. When I finally got up to leave, Grandma hugged me tight. "Don't be a stranger," she said, "and don't let your parents make you think you did anything wrong. You didn't." I drove back to the hotel feeling lighter somehow. The next morning, I woke up to more texts from Mom, asking when I was coming back to the house. I replied that I was heading back to campus early. She sent back a sad face emoji, which was so absurdly inadequate it almost made me laugh. As I was checking out of the hotel, I got another text. This one from Jake. "We should talk. For real." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to get in my car and drive away from this town and never look back. But another part knew this conversation was inevitable. If not now, then someday. I texted back, "Coffee shop on Main, 30 minutes. The coffee shop was neutral territory, public enough to feel safe, but quiet enough for a private conversation. I got there first and claimed a table in the corner, ordering a latte to calm my nerves. When Jake walked in, several people turned to look. Small towns have long memories. He sat down across from me, looking uncomfortable. Up close, I could see dark circles under his eyes. He ordered black coffee when the waitress came by, then sat in silence until she walked away. "I didn't think you'd actually meet me," he finally said. I shrugged. I almost didn't. More silence. Jake stared into his coffee like it held the answers to questions he couldn't articulate. "Why did you want to talk?" I prompted. He took a deep breath. "I wanted to, I don't know, clear the air, I guess." "Clear the air," I repeated. "That's pretty vague." Jake looked up at me, his expression unreadable. "What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? That I fucked up? Fine. I'm sorry. I fucked up." His words should have felt like vindication, but they just sounded hollow. "Are you sorry for what you did? Or sorry you got caught?" He flinched. "Both, I guess. Mostly that I got caught, if I'm being honest. But also, I've had a lot of time to think about that night. About Maya." I waited, not willing to make this easier for him. "They made us take these classes inside," he continued, "about consent and stuff. At first I thought it was bullshit, but then, I don't know, some of it started to make sense. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jake, my arrogant golden boy brother who never admitted fault, was actually acknowledging he might have been wrong. "I still think you should have come to me first," he added quickly. "Before going to the school. We could have worked it out as a family." And there it was. The familiar deflection, the inability to take full responsibility. Some things hadn't changed after all. "There was nothing to work out, Jake," I said quietly. "What you did was wrong. Full stop." He looked away. "Yeah, well, it is what it is now." We sat in silence again, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. Finally, I asked the question that had been bothering me since Dad's toast. "Are you really going to state next semester?" Jake nodded. "Yeah. Dad pulled some strings with his old fraternity buddy on the admissions board." "Of course he did. You know Maya's transferring there too, right?" Jake's eyes widened slightly. He clearly hadn't known. "Is she? Well, it's a big campus. We probably won't run into each other." I thought about Maya on the phone, how strong she'd sounded, how determined to move forward with her life. "If you see her, you should stay away from her," I said firmly. "She deserves that much." Jake looked like he wanted to argue, but then nodded. "Yeah, okay." We finished our coffees in silence. As we were getting ready to leave, Jake hesitated, then asked, "Are you coming back? To visit, I mean." I thought about my parents' house with all of Jake's trophies, about the family dinner where no one mentioned the elephant in the room, about my grandmother's apartment where I'd felt truly welcome for the first time in years. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Maybe, but not for a while." Jake nodded like he'd expected that answer. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. About everything." I couldn't tell if he meant it or not. Maybe it didn't matter. "Goodbye, Jake," I said, and walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. I drove back to campus feeling weirdly empty. Not sad exactly, just hollow. The whole weekend had been such a mindfuck. I kept replaying that last conversation with Jake in my head, trying to figure out if he was actually sorry or just saying what he thought I wanted to hear. The 6-hour drive gave me plenty of time to think. By the time I pulled into the student parking lot, it was almost midnight. My dorm building looked so normal and welcoming compared to the emotional battlefield I'd just left behind. I grabbed my overnight bag and trudged up the stairs, exhausted. Zoe was still awake when I got in, sketching something for her art project. She took one look at my face and closed her sketchbook. "That bad, huh?" she asked. I nodded and collapsed onto my bed. "Worse, actually." She didn't push for details, just offered me some of the cookies her mom had sent. I took one gratefully, and we sat in comfortable silence for a while. That's when I realized how lucky I was to have found actual supportive people in my life. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from Mom. I ignored them and went to my 9 a.m. psychology class. I tried to focus on the lecture about cognitive dissonance, which felt weirdly relevant to my family situation. My phone kept buzzing in my pocket. More texts from Mom, asking if I'd made it back safely, saying we needed to talk more. I turned my phone off completely. After class, I ran into my friend Devin from my study group. He asked how my weekend was, and I gave him the standard fine response. It was easier than explaining the truth. We grabbed coffee and talked about the upcoming midterms instead. Normal college stuff. It felt good to be back in my regular life. That evening, I finally turned my phone back on. 5 more missed calls from Mom, 2 from Dad, and a text from Jake. Think about what I said. Delete. I sent Mom a quick message saying I was back at school safe and needed space. Then I muted the conversation. The next few weeks were busy with midterms and projects. I threw myself into schoolwork, grateful for the distraction. My family situation kept trying to creep into my thoughts, but I pushed it away. I wasn't ready to deal with it yet. Then one night, about 3 weeks after my trip home, I got an email from Maya. My heart jumped when I saw her name in my inbox. "Hey, I hope you're doing okay after seeing your family," she wrote. "I've been thinking about you and wanted to check in. Also, I got accepted to state for the spring semester. I'm nervous but excited. Let me know if you want to talk sometime." I stared at the screen for a long time. State where Jake would be. My stomach twisted into knots. I wrote back congratulating her and asking if she knew Jake would be there too. Her response came an hour later. "Yeah, I heard through mutual friends. Campus is huge though, and honestly, I'm not going to let him dictate my choices anymore. I earned my spot there." I read her email 3 times, amazed at her strength. She'd been through hell because of my brother, and here she was, refusing to let him control her future. Meanwhile, I was still hiding from my family's calls and pretending everything was fine. The next day, I did something I hadn't planned on doing. I called my grandmother. She answered right away, sounding pleased to hear from me. "I've been thinking about everything," I told her. "About Jake, about my parents, about what happened with Maya. And," she prompted gently, "and I don't know how to move forward," I admitted. Part of me wants to just cut them all off completely, but another part feels like that's running away. Grandma was quiet for a moment. "You know, your grandfather and I didn't speak to your father for almost 2 years after he dropped out of college. We thought he was throwing his life away. It was the biggest regret of my life." That silence. I hadn't known that about Dad. He never talked about his past. "What changed?" I asked. "We realized family is complicated," she said simply. "People make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones, but shutting the door completely, well, it doesn't help anyone heal." I thought about that a lot over the next few days. Was I shutting the door on my family? Did I want to? Did they even deserve another chance? A week later, Mom called again. This time, I answered. "I wasn't sure you would pick up," she said, sounding surprised. "I almost didn't," I admitted. There was an awkward pause. Then Mom said something I never expected to hear. "I've been seeing a therapist," she said quietly. "After you left, I realized some things weren't right with how we handled everything. I was so shocked I couldn't speak for a moment." Mom, in therapy? She'd always dismissed therapy as something for weak people who can't handle their problems. "That's good," I finally managed. "I'm trying to understand," she continued. "Why you did what you did. Why you felt you couldn't come to us first." I almost laughed. "Mom, I tried to tell you what I saw. You and Dad immediately took Jake's side. You always did." "I know," she said, her voice cracking a little. "That's what Dr. Phillips is helping me see. We didn't treat you fairly. We put too much pressure on Jake to be perfect, and then couldn't handle it when he wasn't." I sat down on my bed, trying to process what I was hearing. This didn't sound like my mother at all. "Dad doesn't know I'm talking to someone," she added. "He still thinks this will all blow over if we just don't talk about it." That sounded exactly like Dad. Ignore a problem long enough, and it ceases to exist. "Is Jake still going to state?" I asked. "Yes," Mom said. "He's registered for classes already. Your father is very proud." Of course he was. Some things never change. "Maya's going there too," I said. "Did you know that?" There was a long pause. "No, I didn't." "Don't you think that's a problem?" I pressed. "After what he did to her?" Mom sighed. "It's a big school. I'm sure they won't run into each other." That was almost exactly what Jake had said. The family party line, apparently. I changed the subject, asking about Grandma, about the neighbors, about anything else. We talked for about 20 minutes before hanging up. It wasn't a great conversation, but it was something. The semester continued. I aced my midterms and signed up for next semester's classes. Zoe and I made plans to get an apartment together off campus next year. Life kept moving forward. I talked to Mom every couple of weeks. Brief, slightly awkward conversations, but at least we were talking. Dad called once, mostly to ask about my grades and remind me to change my car's oil. He didn't mention Jake or anything that had happened. Classic Dad. In November, I got another email from Maya. She'd visited state for orientation and loved it. She was excited about her classes and had already connected with some people in her major. Reading her email made me smile. She deserved good things after everything she'd been through. Then came Thanksgiving break. I'd been dreading it for weeks. Zoe invited me to go home with her to avoid my family, but something in me felt like I needed to face this. I told Mom I'd come home for the holiday but was staying in a hotel, not the house. She seemed disappointed but didn't argue. The drive home felt different this time. I wasn't as anxious, more resolved. I checked into my hotel, then drove to my parents' house for Thanksgiving dinner. Jake's car was already in the driveway, along with my uncle's SUV and a couple others I didn't recognize. Mom answered the door wearing an apron and a nervous smile. "You're here," she said, giving me an awkward hug. "Everyone's in the living room." I followed her inside, bracing myself. Jake was on the couch talking to our cousin Taylor. He nodded when he saw me but didn't get up. Dad was watching football with my uncle, barely glancing my way when I entered. Grandma was there too, sitting in the armchair by the window. She smiled warmly and patted the seat next to her. Dinner was strained but civil. Everyone stuck to safe topics. The weather, football, Taylor's new job. No one mentioned the past or anything remotely controversial. It was like we were all actors in a play about a normal family Thanksgiving. After dessert, I helped Mom clear the table while everyone else moved back to the living room. We worked in silence for a few minutes before she spoke. "I'm glad you came," she said, rinsing a plate. "It means a lot." I nodded, not sure what to say. "I know things aren't fixed," she continued, "but I hope this is a start." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in years. She seemed older, more tired, but there was something different in her eyes too, a kind of awareness that hadn't been there before. "Maybe," I said. "We'll see." Later, as I was getting ready to leave, Jake cornered me in the hallway. For a second, I tensed up, remembering our last confrontation. But his posture was different this time, less aggressive, more uncertain. "Can we talk outside for a minute?" he asked. I hesitated, then nodded. We stepped out onto the front porch. It was cold, our breath visible in the night air. "I wanted to tell you something," Jake said, shoving his hands in his pockets. I'm not going to state next semester. That caught me off guard. What? Why not? He looked away. I found out Maya's going there. After you told me, I looked into it more. And I don't think it's right for me to be there too. I stared at him, not sure I was hearing correctly. Jake giving up something he wanted because it was the right thing to do? That was new. I applied to Eastern instead, he continued. It's not as good for my major, but it's the right call. Does Dad know? I asked, thinking about how proud he'd been about Jake going to state. Jake nodded. Yeah, he's not happy about it. Keeps saying I shouldn't let one mistake define my future. He made air quotes around one mistake. But you're doing it anyway? Yeah. He kicked at a pebble on the porch. I've been talking to someone too. Like Mom. Different therapist, but same idea. It's helping, I think. I didn't know what to say. This wasn't the Jake I knew. The golden boy who never admitted fault. Who expected the world to bend to his will. This was someone else entirely. Anyway, he said, clearly uncomfortable with the silence. I just wanted you to know. You can tell Maya if you want. Or not. Whatever you think is best. I nodded slowly. I'll think about it. We stood there awkwardly for another moment before Jake turned to go back inside. He paused at the door. For what it's worth, he said quietly. I really am sorry. For everything. Not just what happened with Maya, but how I treated you growing up too. I was a shitty brother. Before I could respond, he went back inside, leaving me alone on the porch with my thoughts. I drove back to my hotel that night feeling strangely off balance. The conversation with Jake had thrown me completely. Was he actually changing? Or was this just another act to get back in everyone's good graces? The next morning, I had breakfast with Grandma at a local diner. She listened as I told her about my conversation with Jake. People can change, she said, stirring her coffee. If they want to badly enough. Do you think he really wants to? I asked. She considered this. I think he's trying. That's a start. I went back to campus the next day with more questions than answers. I told Maya about Jake's decision not to attend state. She seemed surprised but relieved. That's actually decent of him, she said when we talked on the phone. I wasn't looking forward to constantly worrying about running into him. Yeah, I agreed. It's not like him at all. The semester ended. I aced my finals and packed up for winter break. I decided to split my time. A week with Zoe's family, then a few days at home before heading back for the spring semester. Mom was thrilled when I told her, even if it was just a few days. Christmas at home was still awkward, but less tense than Thanksgiving had been. Jake and I managed to have a few normal conversations. Dad remained distant, but civil. Mom tried too hard, but I appreciated the effort. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. On my last night home, Mom knocked on my bedroom door with a small wrapped package. I found this when I was cleaning out the attic, she said, handing it to me. I unwrapped it to find a small wooden box. Inside was a collection of childhood mementos. My science fair ribbons, honor roll certificates, even the program from my middle school play where I had exactly 2 lines. Things I thought had been thrown away years ago. I kept everything, Mom said quietly. I know it didn't seem like it, but I was always proud of you too. I didn't know what to say. This small box of memories felt like more acknowledgement than I'd gotten in my entire childhood. Thanks, I managed, my throat tight. Mom hesitated, then sat on the edge of my bed. I know we can't fix everything overnight. There's a lot of hurt there, on all sides. But I hope we can keep trying. I nodded. I think we can. The next morning, as I was loading my car to head back to campus, Jake came out to help with my bags. So, he said, closing my trunk. Eastern starts next week. I'm kind of nervous, actually. You'll be fine, I said. Just try to be better this time around. He nodded seriously. I'm working on it. We stood there awkwardly for a moment. Then Jake stuck out his hand. I looked at it, then stepped forward and gave him a quick hug instead. It was brief and a little uncomfortable, but it was real. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. My family stood in the driveway, Mom, Dad, and Jake, watching me go. They looked smaller somehow, more human, less like the larger-than-life figures who had dominated my childhood, and more like what they actually were. Flawed people trying to figure things out, just like me. I turned onto the highway, feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because everything was fixed. It wasn't. Not by a long shot. But because for the first time, it felt like maybe, just maybe, we were all moving in the right direction.